You're listening to 105.9 Academy FM, the community radio station for Folkestone. My name's Dave Sharp. Here at Academy FM, we've offered all the general election candidates for Folkestone and Hythe a chance to tell our audience a bit about their party, their political views and their preparation for the election. In this interview, I spoke to the Green Party candidate for Folkestone and Hythe, Martyn Whybrow. Martyn, what do you think are the most important issues for local people?
I think that it is going to really, at this election, revolve around very much the local issues rather than the big sweeping national ones. I think that a lot of the local issues will be around the sort of broad brush of inequality. I think the few green economic shoots that we have seen have left a lot of people behind. And so there are a lot of people struggling locally for different reasons, and that will probably be at the forefront of their minds when considering the different options at the election.
Now, you've been a KCC councillor for the Green Party for 18 months or so maybe. What are the main issues that people want to talk to you about that you would think will be discussed in the campaign for the general election?
Well, obviously, KCC has a whole number of very important areas that it has direct responsibility for. So the types of things that get brought to me as a KCC councillor are around things like social care. We can't forget that the central government policy is to really slash budgets for local authorities. We're bearing the brunt of that at KCC, and that in turn causes a lot of hardships for a lot of residents, and it really does cut frontline services. So things like social care, I get quite a lot of questions and issues around education, school to home transport, for instance, crops up quite a lot. Quite a lot of issues around highways, which could be anything from potholes through to better safety for cyclists, through to 20-mile-an-hour limits and concerns about speeding generally. And then also I get quite a lot of people who have got problems with benefits, with the sort of different aspects of welfare as well. So it's a very broad set of people that come to me with a broad set of issues. But basically, as a councillor, what I always try to do, of course, is to respond and help where I possibly can.
Talking about wider issues that will figure largely in this election campaign. Now, many of our listeners are in Folkestone, and UKIP, in terms of the last KCC elections, as you know, did fairly well in Folkestone. You're the KCC member for Hythe. Do you find on the doorstep when you're talking to people in Hythe that they also want to talk about things like Brussels and immigration and so on?
I think I can put my hand on my heart and say that I really struggle to remember that coming up on the doorstep. It really does nearly always tend to be much more local issues. It's not immigration that people are concerned about. It's things like waiting times at the local hospital. It's about the ability to access social care when they need it. It's about the inability to get their children to school. It's about the increasing cost of rail travel. It's things that affect their daily lives. They're not looking at the EU and Brussels. They're not looking at immigration. I think they're far more sort of grounded in many ways than some of our politicians.
In terms of other issues, now, I think it's fair to say that many people don't know as much about the Green Party as they might about, say, the policies of Labour or the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats, maybe. Can you give us a brief rundown of the Green Party's policies on, say, dealing with the national debt, the NHS, education and so on?
Yeah, certainly. Well, the Green Party is a very well-rounded party, actually. We've got policies on absolutely everything. And I think the first thing to emphasise is that our policies are decided by our membership. So it is completely democratic. Conferences, the members will discuss and then vote, and that will become policy. Obviously, the environmental policies of the Green Party, I think, are well understood, and we would certainly put climate crisis at the very top of the agenda. We also are very much a party of equality. We are anti-austerity. We believe that it is extremely unfair that a lot of the brunt of the austerity programme is being borne by people who are already struggling. So on NHS, for instance, we definitely want to protect the NHS from privatisation. We want it free access to all. We want a lot more investment in the NHS. We want a lot more investment in education. But we're not a sort of party of sort of just wishful thinkers, I suppose. We have a completely set out manifesto which explains how we would pay for all of this. We state what we would do with regards to taxes. We state things like we would scrap Trident, which would release something like £60 billion over the lifetime of that nuclear weapon. So it's a very, we've been described as sort of realistically idealistic, and I think that's a good way of describing us. I quite like that description.
The thorny issue of Trident and nuclear deterrence was discussed during the last election campaign, and its ugly head is still raising itself regularly.
Yes.
So the Green Party would scrap Trident. Would you leave the UK without a nuclear deterrent?
We would, actually, long and short of it. We do not believe in Trident. We think it is its day is gone. It's old technology. It's an old deterrent which doesn't fit with today's threats. We also think that, frankly, £60 billion could be much better spent on public services, for instance. So we really have focused on that. At the same time, we are certainly not keen on increased spending on defence generally, and we do not think that it should be a priority alongside other things that we certainly would weight much higher.
So in terms of the Green Party and where its power base is, you have one MP in Parliament, but you do have a few people like yourself who sit on a variety of local councils up and down the nation. Now, recently, Scotland and devolved powers have been in the news. Does your party believe that more powers should be locally devolved in England?
We do indeed. I think the first point I'd make is that we feel that the electoral system is very unfair. We would do much better in a proportional representation model than we do first past the post. You know, we are polling at something like 9, 10 or 11% at the moment. Our membership has doubled in the last 12 months. But come the general election, it's going to be very difficult to actually replicate that support in terms of getting MPs, for sure. We do, as a whole, certainly are in favour of localism in its proper sense, rather than just paying lip service to localism. We feel that devolution of powers is right. We're in favour of voting for 16 to 18-year-olds. We want to re-engage people with the electoral system. We want to get people enthusiastic about politics again. And I think the way to do that is to come up with a much fairer electoral system, and also to give more power to local representatives and to local institutions and councils.
So you seem to be polling okay at the moment. In your experience on the doorstep, who are you taking votes from? The Lib Dems, Labour, the Tories, UKIP even?
We're certainly sort of filling a bit of a void which has been left by the Lib Dems. A lot of young voters in particular have been put off the Lib Dems because of the broken promises of the previous election. I think there are quite a lot of Labour supporters who are coming across to us because, don't forget, at the end of the day, the Green Party is a left-wing party. It is left-wing of Labour. And as Labour has moved more and more to the centre, I think that has left behind a lot of traditional Labour voters who were also put off by things like the Iraq War. We're seeing a lot of people, I think, coming forward to support the Green Party who, frankly, actually haven't been very engaged with politics before, but they might be very concerned about climate change. They may also be quite concerned about the right-wing agenda of current politics and are prompted to get engaged, maybe sometimes for the first time.
Now, you're the KCC member for Hythe. You're probably better known in that area because of that than you are in parts of Folkestone. How will you be campaigning? How will you be raising awareness of you and your party? Is this going to be a knocking on doors election? Are you going to be in town centres? Is it all based on social media? What are you going to do?
All of the above, really. We've got a great team of volunteers. We've got a really good set of candidates building up, because obviously we've got the local elections at the same time. We'll be doing really what we did in Hythe when I got elected, because don't forget that was a really big upset, really. We overturned a very large Conservative majority, and nobody ever thought Hythe would be anything other than Tory. And yet here I am. It does show that if you get the messages across, if you explain what the party is about, if you are able to relay your enthusiasm, relay the reasons why we are involved in politics, where you don't join the Green Party for some sort of ego trip or power craze. It is, you're involved because you care about the community, you care about the environment, you care about the sort of developments that are happening around.
And finally, you got your victory in Hythe and became KCC member, really based around a few local issues. If you're going to try and get seats elsewhere in the area, in Folkestone and so on, what local issues are you going to be campaigning on in these other areas?
Well, I think it is a very diverse area, of course, Shepway, so it will be a little bit different out on the marsh, for instance, versus in the centre of Folkestone. And even just Folkestone itself is an incredibly diverse town. So I think that for some areas, for instance, a very major issue for people is the standard of a lot of the private rented accommodation and the lack of protection for tenants. There'll be a lot of people who commute, for instance, and so they will probably have our sort of eye-wateringly painful rail fares at heart. It's taking more and more of people's income to actually travel to work. We are, by the way, in favour of the renationalisation of the railways. We would take back the private contracts as they expired. So I think that will be, those sort of types of issues will be quite pertinent in Folkestone. I think there will also be undoubtedly things on people's doorsteps that will be will be very concerning for them. In some of the rural areas, for instance, the latest announcements about a 3,000 place lorry park at Western Hangar will be a concern. Some of the rural areas are also finding that their bus services are being reduced. KCC has had to cut significantly the young person's freedom pass, so it's getting more expensive to send kids to school. So it will be a broad range of issues, but at the end of the day, coming back to the point I made earlier, I think they will be local issues first and foremost, not big national ones.
You're listening to 105.9 Academy FM, the community radio station for Folkestone. My name's Dave Sharp, and I was speaking to the Green Party candidate for Folkestone and Hythe, Martyn Whybrow. The full list of general election candidates for Folkestone and Hythe is Lynn Beaumont, Lib Dem, Damien Collins, Conservative, Seth Cruz, TUSC, Claire Jeffrey, Labour, Rohan Kapoor, YPP, Andy Thomas, Socialist Party of Great Britain, Martyn Whybrow, Green Party, and Harriet Yeo, UKIP. For more information and interviews, head to academyfmfolkstone.com.